Hello, teachers! Welcome to the second video in this series on enhancing lessons with supplementary materials. In the previous video, we looked at reasons to use them. Now we're going to look at 3 essential supplementary materials we want to have in our collection and use with our students. And in the final video, we're going to look at other things that we could use to enhance learning and engage students. The 3 essentials are a whiteboard with a variety of colored markers, alphabet flashcards, and a puppet or puppets. Let's begin by looking at a whiteboard. Here are some ways that a whiteboard may be used. We may draw pictures of something on a whiteboard to help a student better understand a concept. In one lesson, a deer is eating a twig. Twig is not necessarily a common word that students learn early in English learning, so how can we help students better understand twig? We can draw a picture of the twig with other common parts of a bush or a tree that the student probably already knows, and show that to the student so they can begin to distinguish the parts and the relationships between them. Notice often students at that point already know what a tree is. They may know the word branch. They often know the words leaves. And now we can show them the growth of a sprout on the twigs in the smaller part of the branch growing out here, to help them to begin to distinguish between that and the other parts of the tree. Notice too that I could use color to help them do that. We have the whiteboard in the virtual classroom. That certainly comes in handy, especially when we want the students to draw or write something. But by having our own whiteboard, we're able to use color to emphasize various things. For example, if we need to help the students practice sounds, we can use our own whiteboard to do that. In one lesson, Fishing with Grandpa, the word hook is used, and many students have trouble with that double O sound in hook. So we can use our whiteboard, if time allows, and write down the combination of letters, the double O with the K, a double O with an L, and then put various letters at the beginning of the words to have the student practice. Hook, book, look, took, pool, cool, stool, tool, those kinds of things. And the student can practice saying those different word combinations. Notice that by using color, I can help the student to distinguish also the sound differences. The double O for the sound in green, the double O for the sound in red, can aid in the student's memory and retention. In this example, this situation, it was very important for that student to learn that sound in hook. It was part of the lesson objective. In some cases, we just want to extend learning because we have a lot of extra time at the end of class. In one situation, I had a student who completed the lesson quite early, had finished up skills activities on main ideas and details, shown a love of creating her own stories. So we opened up the virtual classroom whiteboard at the end of class, and she began to create her own story with a main idea and a bunch of details by drawing some pictures and some simple words with it. And I asked her to describe using sentences what she was doing as she was doing it. And as she said those sentences, I quickly wrote them on my whiteboard. Then with that information, after she was all done, we could look up at that whiteboard, at those words and sentences, clean them up a little bit, and she was able to look at it and reread her entire story. So these are some ways that we can use the whiteboard. Here's another example from a lesson on where plants grow. In this situation, it uses prepositions in or on, and I noticed the student was having difficulty. She was stuttering as she was choosing to say in or on in front of these different words, and later on, when the words weren't in front of her, she had a more difficulty remembering whether or not the preposition should be in or on. So one simple way of helping to address that issue was at the end of class, as time allowed, writing in or on here and writing the other words over here, and then having her just go back and forth. In pots, in water, on water, and practice it. To create a more visual effect, in other instances, you can actually ask the student to draw a pot, to draw some water on the virtual class room whiteboard, to draw a clump of soil or some sand on a beach or some other plants or a rock, and then have the student place a plant of some kind in the pots, in the soil, on a rock. To aid in that, the teacher can actually draw some of those things to help the student to think about how it may be drawn, and then use the words with the visual element of having the student create those things to help aid in the student's memory of whether or not it's actually in it or on it. So these are some ways that we can use whiteboards to aid in student learning and engagement. Do you have ideas? We hope you'll share them. The next one we're going to talk about is puppets. We saw the puppet in the first video, engage the student, help the student get a little more involved, but also help the student in learning because of the motion involved in seeing that mouse eat the cheese and enjoy the cheese. The student develops their understanding of cheese. What are some other ways that we can use puppets? Well, many experienced teachers, again, attest to the benefits of puppets in engaging students, particularly the quiet or shy ones. We can also have the puppets engage in various actions. For example, my frog puppet can hop. He can hop slowly. He can hop quickly. Now, I could hop to demonstrate the action, but many times students really enjoy it when a character, like a puppet, an animal puppet, does the action. They like to play act, and so when they see that character perform that action rather than the teacher, sometimes they're more inclined to get involved in imitating the action themselves and remembering the action as well. We can also use puppets to interact with each other, to communicate with each other in conversation, to help the students to develop more conversational skills. Hello, I'm a mouse. Hello, I'm a frog. And as students see the conversational interaction, it helps them to understand about conversation back and forth and what would be said. So let's see how we could use a puppet in a skills activity. In this particular activity, the student is asked to use a descriptor or an adjective in front of words in sentences. And I noticed that one of the students was having trouble. She was forgetting to use the descriptor in front of many of the sentences. She would say the correct word to identify the items, but forget to use a descriptor in front of it. And so at the end of class, we took extra time to practice using descriptors with the puppets. In this situation, I showed her my small mouse puppet and my big mouse puppet. Is it a white puppet or a gray puppet? And she could say the sentence, it is a white puppet. Is it a big mouse or a small mouse? And she could use the descriptor, big mouse, to help her practice using those descriptions in front of the words a bit more. So those are some ideas, some ways to use puppets in engaging students and promoting learning. What ideas do you have? Finally, we're going to talk about alphabet cards. Alphabet cards come in a variety, sometimes with just the letter in front, sometimes with the pictures in the back, pictures and letters on the front together. Magnetic letters that can be placed on the whiteboard is a way to handle alphabet as well. But often I find the cards are one of the easiest things to get and to make if we don't find them easily or inexpensively around. Usually you can, to use and be the most versatile. What are some ways that alphabet cards are versatile? Well, number one, they help the early learners to practice their alphabet. Sometimes the younger ones forget some of those letters. For more advanced learners, they can be used to work on sounds. For example, with the and the oo sounds, I was able to flash letters in front of the word and have the student, as quickly as possible, say the words as the letters are flashing in front of them. And practice going back and forth between the and the oo, so the student would have to distinguish between them more quickly. Some First Leap lessons ask students to complete spelling of words. Perhaps you've noticed that in some of the lessons already. And sometimes the students have trouble remembering which letters to use. Quickly using a flashcard or a series of flashcards can help the student, give the student some choices, and perhaps help them to recall which letter to use. Sometimes we can actually say the letter name. Sometimes we can say the letter sound we want from that letter name, depending on what the needs of the student are. So here are some examples of ways to use alphabet flashcards. What do you have in mind? How can you use alphabet flashcards? One of the things we could do is create our own. It's not that difficult. And sometimes we can even create flashcards with high frequency use words on them, like a or an. In one lesson, the students are asked to use either a or an in front of the words, and by having the cards sometimes flashing before the student, it helps aid the student in using the correct one in front of the word. An artist, a gardener, an astronaut, a cowboy, that kind of thing. So as the student is practicing, we can aid them by flashing those cards and emphasizing one or the other as they're saying the words. So we've gone through three main ways that we can use, or three main types of supplementary materials that we can use. A whiteboard with colored markers, alphabet flashcards, and puppets. It's so important that we gather these and have them in our collections because they can aid in learning, promote engagement. And we hope we've given you some ideas of ways that you can use them. Please share your ideas too, and go into the third video to see other supplementary materials that you can use to enhance learning and engagement. Thank you. Happy teaching.